Welcome to Her Voice Story, where what really happens can break your heart and ignite your spirit. If you're ready for a tale that will make you question everything about trust, betrayal, and the limits of a mother's forgiveness, hit subscribe right now. This is the story of a 68-year-old woman named Eleanor Maddox, who learned that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones you've loved since the moment they were born. This is about family, betrayal, attempted murder, and a revenge so devastating you'll never forget it. My name is Eleanor Maddox. At 68 years old, I thought I understood what it meant to be wealthy. My grandfather's oil fortune meant I never worried about bills. But I learned early on that money comes with its own predators. Money doesn't just talk, it threatens and sometimes kills. But I never thought the real danger would come from my own son, Lucas. The boy I once rocked to sleep and called my pride and joy. The Maddox estate stretched across 500 acres of rich Texas land, where oil pumps pulled black gold from the dirt my family bled for. The house was more than a home. It was a fortress. Built from hand-carved mahogany, crystal chandeliers, and Persian rugs that cost more than some people's homes. Every detail screamed success, but for me, it mostly echoed with loneliness. My husband, Richard, died 5 years ago, leaving me to manage an empire I never asked for. One ordinary Tuesday morning in October, I was reviewing oilfield reports when I heard the familiar sound of Lucas's BMW rumbling up the drive. My son rarely visited without a reason, and as I watched him through the window, I noticed the stiffness in his shoulders. Lucas had always been handsome in that privileged, private school way that makes life easy and character shallow. But lately, his easy smile was gone, replaced by a hunger that scared me. He looked like someone who tasted failure and would do anything to avoid it again. He burst into my study without knocking, his expensive suit wrinkled, his hair wild, and his eyes hollow. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, voice shaking. I put down my glasses and really looked at him. There were dark circles beneath his eyes, and his hands were trembling. "Of course, darling. Sit down, you look unwell." He slumped into the leather chair across from my desk, running a shaky hand through his hair. "I'll get straight to it. I need money, a lot of money." I tried not to sigh, but the disappointment stung. Lucas had a habit of needing my investments. The last was a $300,000 app that fizzled out without even a press release. Before that, it was a clothing brand that never made it off paper. Every time he failed, I heard elaborate stories about market timing and evil investors, but it always ended the same way. My account lighter, his dreams scattered. "How much?" I asked, bracing myself. 100,000. He said it like he was asking for lunch money. The number made my stomach twist. "That's a lot, Lucas. What's this for?" He jumped into a pitch, talking fast, desperate. "It's a tech company, revolutionary online marketing, first-year profits through the roof, connections with Fortune 500 companies." I'd heard it all before. "Who's your partner?" I asked. "Lucas." Avoided my eyes. "You wouldn't know him." From California, proven track record. His evasion was obvious. I spent 3 decades as a prosecutor before I retired, and I knew when someone was hiding something. "Lucas, we've been through this so many times. I've supported your ventures, and none have worked out. Maybe it's time you tried with your own resources." His face changed instantly. Shadows crept over his features, and his hands balled into fists. In that moment, I saw something dark, something that reminded me of his father, Richard, who tried to swindle me out of my inheritance years before. My own resources? His voice rose, almost shouting. "What resources, Mom?" "I'm drowning. Here, you have no idea what it's like to live in your shadow. Everyone expects me to be a Maddox, to succeed. But how can I when you hold everything?" I kept my tone gentle. "I've given you every advantage." He laughed a bitter, ugly sound. "You've given me just enough to fail publicly. Just enough so I look like a spoiled brat who can't make it, but never enough to succeed." It stung because there was a sliver of truth. I had been cautious about how much I gave him, maybe too cautious, because I'd seen too many rich families destroyed by spoiled children. "Lucas, let's calm down and talk this through. I'm not giving you the money." He stood so quickly. His chair nearly toppled over. His voice was cold, calculated. "You'll regret this, Mom. One day you'll be old and alone, and you'll realize you chose money over family." That line hit harder than any slap. But what terrified me was the way he looked at me, not with anger, but with something empty, dangerous. "Lucas, are you in some sort of trouble?" I tried, voice trembling. For a moment, his mask slipped. I saw fear, panic, then he turned to leave, voice hollow. "Forget it. I'll handle it myself." As Lucas's BMW tore out of the driveway, I sat there, heart pounding. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Whatever trouble he was in, it was serious, and it had something to do with that $100,000. I picked up my phone to call my private investigator, but I hesitated. He's my son, I thought, my flesh and blood. We could work through this. That hesitation would nearly cost me my life. 2 days later, Lucas returned. This time, he brought his wife, Serena. The moment I saw her, I knew this wasn't a casual visit. If Lucas was desperate and direct, Serena was icy and calculating. Their arrival was perfectly 10:10 a.m. on the dot. Not too early, not too late, the deliberate dot. Serena stepped from the car. Platinum blonde hair flawless, every inch of her body wrapped in designer clothes. She walked with the easy grace of someone who knew she owned any room she entered. But her eyes, sharp and cold, missed nothing. "Eleanor, I hope we're not intruding," Serena said, gliding into the kitchen, holding 2 delicate cups of coffee. Her smile was all show, teeth bright and eyes empty. "I brought you something special, Ethiopian beans with Madagascar vanilla. Thought you might enjoy a change." The coffee smelled odd. Bitter, with a chemical note beneath the vanilla that reminded me of almonds and something harsh. After decades as a prosecutor, I trust my instincts, and every alarm in my body was going off. "How thoughtful, dear," I said, smiling as I took the cup, watching her closely. She was studying me too, eyes like a predator watching prey. Lucas hovered in the doorway, avoiding my eyes, glued to his phone. His usual nervousness had been replaced by a frozen kind of dread. "Lucas mentioned you two had a disagreement," Serena said, settling in with her own cup. Without family support, her words dripped with accusation. I noticed she didn't drink her coffee, she only encouraged me to sip mine. I made a decision in a split second. When Serena turned to look at Lucas, I quietly switched our cups. She didn't notice, they were identical white china. I set mine down and started a careful conversation, probing to see what Serena knew about Lucas's supposed business partner. She danced around my questions, eyes flickering, never giving a real answer. Then, after 20 minutes, Serena took a sip from her cup, the one she had handed me. I watched her face twist. Confusion, and then something else flashed in her eyes. I pretended to sip mine and set it aside. We chatted about nothing, but I never lost focus. When Serena started coughing, I realized what she'd done. Her polite throat clearing quickly escalated to violent spasms. Her face flushed, her skin grayed. "I can't breathe," she gasped, grabbing the table. "Something's wrong." Lucas rushed over, putting on a performance. "Serena, what's happening? Do you need to go to the hospital?" She clung to him, her breath ragged, her eyes wild. "My throat's burning." She wheezed, her voice fading as we scrambled to the car. Racing to the emergency room, I couldn't help thinking the coffee was meant for me. My own daughter-in-law had just poisoned herself with the weapon she planned for me. The irony nearly made me laugh, but the performance wasn't over yet. The drive to Mercy General was like a scene from a suspense film. Serena sat in the back seat, every cough and gasp perfectly timed, her hand clutching Lucas's arm as if the world were slipping away. Lucas looked back at me through the rear view mirror with wide, frantic eyes, trying to seem like the desperate husband, but I knew him too well. I watched the two of them as the Texas landscape blurred past, every mile marker a countdown to whatever performance they were about to stage. Next, Serena's breathing turned ragged. Her face lost its color, her lips tinged blue. "It burns," she managed between coughing fits, voice barely a whisper. "Hold on, we're almost there." Lucas shouted, speeding through a red light, a performance as dramatic as any I'd kiss shouted. Scene from a defendant on the stand, but I wasn't afraid for Serena. I was afraid for myself. Because if Serena survived, she would have the perfect story. The wealthy, controlling mother-in-law who poisoned her for standing in the way of family money. The trap was snapping shut, and I was the animal about to lose everything. At the EA entrance, Lucas leaped from the car and shouted for help. "My wife, she can't breathe, please." Within seconds, Serena was whisked onto a gurney. Nurses hooked her to monitors. A doctor began rapid-fire questions while Lucas clung to her hand, painting himself as the loving, terrified husband. Dr. Parker Young, calm and decisive, stepped in. What happened here? She started coughing after coffee, Lucas said, trembling. She just collapsed. I don't know what happened. I stood quietly, watching every move, listening for the holes in their story. The nurses buzzed around Serena, checking her vitals, drawing blood. Mrs. Maddox, Dr. Parker turned to me. Did you also have coffee this morning? Yes, but we had separate cups, I answered, careful and measured. Serena brought them from the kitchen. Same pot, different mugs. Dr. Parker nodded, making notes, his eyes flicking between us. I could see the wheels turning in his mind. Was this a case of food poisoning, an allergic reaction, or something far darker? Serena kept up her act. It burns my throat. I can't breathe. Dr. Parker called for oxygen and N4. I watched her, so pale and dramatic, her eyes darting to Lucas every few seconds, as if to confirm the next line in their script. Lucas played his part well, wiping her brow, whispering comforting words, making sure the whole room saw his devotion, but Serena wasn't acting anymore. The poison was real. I could see the terror now something had gone wrong. Her voice became a whisper, the words slurred. Dr. Parker ordered more tests. The air became a blur of noise and movement. Serena was soon hooked up to a heart monitor, her breaths coming shallow and fast. Mrs. Maddox, do you know if Serena has any allergies? Dr. Parker asked. None that I know of. She prepared the coffee herself. I barely touched mine. Lucas shot me a look, dark and full of warning. After what felt like an hour, Dr. Parker emerged, face grave. We found traces of cyanide in her system. We're starting an antidote protocol, but we need to know if there's any possibility she was exposed at home. The word cyanide hit the room like a gunshot. Lucas looked at me, horrified. Cyanide? Oh my God, how could that be in our coffee? I kept my voice steady. That's what I'd like to know. It wasn't long before Detective David Parker arrived, a sharp-eyed man in his 40s with a calm, serious voice. Mrs. Maddox, I'd like to speak with you in private, please. He led me to a small consultation room away from the chaos. The walls were painted a sterile white and the air felt heavy. Before we begin, you are not under arrest. But I need you to walk me through everything that happened this morning. I explained every detail, the odd smell in the coffee, my hesitation the moment I switched the cups, how Serena had insisted I drink first but had gotten distracted. I kept my voice even, my words measured just like I had taught witnesses. For years. Detective Parker scribbled notes, never interrupting, his eyes occasionally flicking up to meet mine. When he switched the cups, why didn't you just refuse the coffee altogether? I paused, choosing my words. It was instinct. I didn't want to cause drama if nothing was wrong. I thought switching the cups would be safer. He wrote something down, his face giving away nothing. Who else knew about this visit? Just Lucas and Serena. They showed up unexpectedly. He leaned forward. Have you had any threats recently? Anyone who might want to harm you? I hesitated. I thought about Lucas's desperate plea for money, his angry exit, the tension. I saw in his eyes. But I wasn't ready to share that. Not yet. Nothing specific, I reply, looking him straight in the eye. But when you have money, you're always aware that you could be a target. Detective Parker nodded, then excused himself to talk. To Lucas, through the thin hospital walls, I could hear their voices. My mother's been acting strange lately, Lucas said, loud enough for me to catch every word. She's suspicious of everyone. I mean, I don't think she'd actually hurt anyone, but she's been different. In what way? The Incy. Detective asked. Just little things, asking questions about Serena's background, making comments about people who marry for money. She's been paranoid for a while. My own son, spinning a story of my instability, planting seeds of doubt. With every careful word. Has your mother ever expressed hostility towards Serena? No, not directly, but there's tension. She's always controlling about the family money. She doesn't like anyone getting close to it. Each sentence was a knife in my back. Lucas wasn't just playing the victim. He was turning suspicion on me, building a case brick by brick. It was clever, and it was working. When Detective Parker returned to me, his tone had changed. Mrs. Maddox, I have to ask some direct questions. Have you ever been concerned about Serena's intentions with your family's wealth? I think any parent would be cautious, but I've never had a reason to distrust her personally. Lucas mentioned you've been acting suspicious lately. I shook my head. He may be reading normal caution as suspicion. I have not changed how I act. I could see Detective Parker's mind working, piecing together the narrative. Wealthy mother. Controlling, suspicious, motive, opportunity, Mrs. Maddox, I'm going to need your permission to search your home, he said. Of course, I have nothing to hide. Back in Serena's hospital room, I caught her eye through the curtain. She was sitting up, no longer gasping, chatting with a nurse. When she saw me, she smiled a small, knowing smile that made my skin crawl. I understood then. The real game had only just begun. Detective Parker arrived at my house later that afternoon, warrant in hand, forensic team in tow. The sight of strangers in latex gloves moving through the rooms I'd spent decades protecting was almost too much to bear. We appreciate your cooperation, Detective Parker said as his team began combing through the kitchen. I led them to the pantry where the coffee was kept, then to the laundry where cleaning supplies were stored. Every bottle, every package was handled like it could contain evidence of murder. Do you keep any unusual chemicals at home, Mrs. Maddox? No more than anyone else. Bleach, ammonia, drain cleaner. The search was slow, methodical, excruciating. They took samples from every surface, dusted for fingerprints, bagged every coffee mug. Then a shout from upstairs and a jolt through my body. Detective Parker, you need to see this. In the guest bathroom, a room I rarely used, they found a small glass vial hidden behind the medicine cabinet, traces of clear liquid inside. Next to it was a folded piece of paper, handwritten, listing Serena's name and dosage calculations. The handwriting looked disturbingly like my own. Detective Parker held the items up in evidence bags. Mrs. Maddox, can you explain these? My heart hammered in my chest. I've never seen those before, I whispered. He showed me the list. The way the letters curled, the way the I's were dotted, I couldn't deny it looked just like my writing. I felt the world tilt. Who had access to your home today? Lucas and Serena were here. When we left for the hospital, Lucas had time to come back alone while I was gone. Are you suggesting your son planted this evidence? The words sounded wild, even to me. I'm saying someone with access could have put it there. Someone who knows my habits, my handwriting. Detective Parker's eyes were filled with doubt. That's a very serious accusation to make against your own son. It's not an accusation, I answered, my voice barely above a whisper. It's the only thing that makes sense. He nodded, sealing the vial and the note in evidence bags. We'll take these for analysis. And Mrs. Maddox, do you own any firearms? I blinked, caught off guard. Yes, a pistol in my bedroom safe. Why? We'll need to examine it as well. I led into my bedroom, opened the safe, and handed over a .38 revolver untouched for months. They took the weapon in a box of ammunition, bagging everything as if I were a dangerous criminal. When the search was finally over, Detective Parker pulled me aside. Based on what we found today, you're now a person of interest in this case. I strongly suggest you contact an attorney. You're not under arrest, but please don't leave town. I nodded, numb. As the officers left, I looked around my once peaceful home. Everything felt wrong. Every corner, every memory now seemed tainted. I sat in my study as the sun set, oil pumps still pounding in the fields, wondering if I would ever feel safe again. But under the weight of shock and betrayal, something in me hardened. Lucas had tried to ruin me. Serena had tried to kill me. But they had made one terrible mistake. They had underestimated me. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I wandered my own home feeling like a stranger, the air thick with the scent of latex gloves and police dusting powder. Every door seemed like it had been left ajar, every light switch too bright or too dim. My fortress of mahogany and marble now felt exposed and violated. The memories of family celebrations and holidays replaced with visions of handcuffs and police. Flashlights dot. It was past midnight when I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the study, staring out the window at the oil pumps as they clawed at the earth. Their rhythmic groan reminded me of a heartbeat steady, relentless, never stopping even as my world cracked around me. Lucas hadn't just begged for money. He had come with murder in his eyes. Serena had walked into my kitchen and handed me poison with a smile. The people I loved most had plotted together, and now they were turning the world against me. The police saw me as the controlling matriarch, paranoid and dangerous, with both motive and means. The evidence, planted or not, was convincing, but there was one thing Lucas had forgotten. I hadn't spent a lifetime surrounded by sharks without learning how to bite back. I needed help. Not just any lawyer, but the best, someone who didn't care about the odds. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 5 years. Benjamin Cross speaking. Ben, it's Eleanor. I need your help. Someone is trying to destroy me, and I think it's my own son. Ben had been my right hand for 2 decades in the prosecutor's office. He was the only person who truly understood how my mind worked, who knew how to fight in the dark corners where the law doesn't always shine. His voice changed instantly, turning sharp and focused. Tell me everything, Eleanor. Don't leave anything out, so I told him. I described Lucas's desperate request for money, Serena's poisoned coffee, the police search, and the evidence that now made me the main suspect in attempted murder. Ben listened quietly, taking it all in. His only interruption, the occasional hum of understanding. Attempted murder and conspiracy. This is a mess, Eleanor. You need a criminal defense attorney right now. I know a man, Marcus Halle. He's ruthless, brilliant, and not afraid to fight dirty. I'll call him for you. In the meantime, assume you're under surveillance. Every phone call, every movement, every visitor. The police will be watching. My hands shook as I set the phone down. A lifetime of order shattered in 2 days. My own son had made me an enemy in my own home. Marcus Halle arrived the next morning. He was younger than I expected, but Ben vouched for him, and the steel in his eyes told me he was already calculating every angle. Mrs. Maddox, Marcus said, settling into the study as if he'd always belonged there. Benjamin briefed. Emmy, the prosecution thinks they have a solid case, but there are holes. Timeline for one. The poisoning had to be planned, but how could you know they'd visit that day? And then there's motive. Why would you try to kill Serena when your real problem is with Lucas? I nodded, my mind racing. The prosecution will say I was protecting the inheritance, keeping it away from a daughter-in-law I didn't trust. They might, but that's a weak motive for murder. Wealthy people don't need to kill gold diggers, they just write new wills. Tell me about the evidence. I described the vial and the note, the way the handwriting matched mine, even though I had never seen them before. Marcus scribbled notes, asking precise questions about the timeline and Lucas's access to my home. The planted evidence is too neat, Marcus said. Real poisoners don't leave signed confessions with dosage calculations, but the jury doesn't know that. We need to dig deeper. Ben is already running background checks on Serena and Lucas. If this isn't their first crime, we'll find something. His confidence steadied me. But deep down, a cold fear gnawed at my heart. I had never doubted Lucas before, not really. Even as his businesses failed, as his debts mounted, I always believed there was still a good man buried in him. That belief was crumbling now, replaced by something harder and sharper. If Lucas and Serena were desperate enough to poison me, there was nothing they wouldn't do next. I barely slept. At 3 a.m, I heard a car in the driveway. From my darkened bedroom, I watched Lucas's BMW sit with its engine running, headlights off. He didn't come inside. He sat there for nearly 15 minutes, making phone calls, pacing in the headlights, agitated and anxious. Then he tried the front door. When he found it locked, he circled the house, checking windows, even testing the latch on the patio doors. He wasn't checking on me. He was looking for a way in. When he finally drove away, my hands were trembling. I called Marcus immediately. He was casing the house. I whispered, breathless, looking for ways to get inside. Don't touch anything, Marcus said. If there are fingerprints or recordings, we'll need them. The next morning, the phone rang. Detective Parker's voice was formal, stripped of all warmth. Mrs. Maddox, the preliminary forensics confirm your fingerprints on the vial. The handwriting analysis is consistent with your samples. I need you to come to the station for additional questioning. You have the right to have your attorney present. I hung up and called Marcus. They're moving quickly, he said. They want to make an arrest before we can dig up any dirt on Lucas or Serena. We have to move faster. That afternoon, we sat together in the police station waiting room, the air tense with dread. The evidence against me was strong circumstantial, but damning. I had motive, means, and now forensic proof linking me to the supposed poison. I watched people pass by, some glancing at me with curiosity, others with suspicion. This was how it began, the slow unraveling of a reputation, one thread at a time. Finally, Detective Parker called us in. He sat across from us, files stacked. In front of him, his eyes tired but focused. "Mrs. Maddox, new forensic results have arrived. The poison found in Serena's system is an exact match for what was in the vial recovered from your home. We also found traces on a coffee mug in your kitchen." My heart sank, but Marcus was quick. "My client maintains her innocence. This evidence is the result of contamination or deliberate tampering." Detective Parker frowned. "You're suggesting someone else poisoned Serena, then broke into Mrs. Maddox's home to plant evidence?" "I'm suggesting the timeline and circumstances do not support the conclusion that my client is guilty. There are other people with motive and access." But I could see in the detective's eyes. He had already made up his mind. I was there. Villain in his story, the wealthy widow who'd finally snapped. "Mrs. Maddox, based on the evidence, I am placing you under arrest for attempted murder." I heard the metallic click of handcuffs before I felt them, the cold steel a jolt of reality. Marcus's face tightened with worry, but he squeezed my shoulder as they led me away. Lucas and Serena had played their game perfectly. They'd painted me as the jealous, controlling mother who tried to murder her daughter-in-law. Now I was paying the price for believing in Family Daw as the police car pulled away from the station. I turned to look back at the building, determined not to cry. They might have trapped me for now, but as long as I was alive, I wasn't finished fighting. Jail was every nightmare I'd ever had. Gray concrete, flickering lights, doors that never stopped clanging. My cellmate was a woman named Rosa Delgado, in for check fraud and unshakably calm. "First time?" Rosa asked as I fumbled with the thin blanket. "Unfortunately, yes. What did they say you did?" "They think I tried to poison my daughter-in-law." Rosa let out a low whistle. "Family, always the nastiest kind of trouble. I didn't do it." She shrugged. "Nobody in here did it. The real question is, can you prove you didn't?" That was the thought that haunted me every minute. In the cell at night, listening to distant cries and door slamming, I replayed every moment with Lucas and Serena. Every smile that had been fake, every word that now sounded like a warning. My mind raced, searching for mistakes I could use to expose them. The bail hearing was set for Monday. Marcus told me the prosecution was arguing I was a flight risk, too wealthy, too dangerous. The district attorney was hungry for headlines, eager to make an example of the oil heiress who supposedly tried to murder her own family. Marcus visited me in jail. Eyes steely, jaw set. "They're building their case fast, Eleanor." "But so are we." Ben has uncovered something. Lucas owes over $300,000 in gambling debts to people who don't care about the law. That number made me dizzy. How? Poker, sports betting, cryptocurrency gone bad. The kind of debts that get people killed. My breath caught. "What about Serena?" Marcus's voice grew grim. "She's not who she says she is." Ben traced her real identity. Her name is Vanessa St. Clair. She has a record for fraud, identity theft, and was questioned in the suspicious death of an elderly man in Arizona. No charges stuck, but the pattern is clear. The room seemed to tilt around me. Lucas hadn't just married a beautiful woman. He'd married a professional predator. They'd planned this together from the start. I barely slept that night. Every noise in the jail making me flinch. But as dawn crept through the tiny cell window, a new resolve took root in my chest. Lucas and Vanessa thought they had won, but they didn't know what I was willing to do to survive. The days in jail blurred together, each one marked by the clatter of metal doors and the hum of voices echoing down the concrete halls. At night, I lay awake, my mind racing with memories and regrets, replaying the last months with Lucas and Serena, no, Vanessa, and searching every conversation for clues I'd missed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lucas's face as he begged for money, or Serena's cold eyes as she handed me that poisoned coffee. I thought about my own hand, trembling as I accepted the cup. Never imagining that my kindness could be my undoing. My only comfort was the steady stream of visits from Marcus and occasional calls from Ben. They became my lifeline's reminders. That someone still believed me, that I wasn't as alone as the world was trying to make me feel. 3 days after my arrest, I sat on the narrow bunk in my cell, knees pulled to my chest when the guard announced my bail hearing. The courthouse was a circus. Reporters crowded the steps, shouting my name and snapping photos as I shuffled past in an orange jumpsuit. My whole life was now a headline, my shame exposed to the world. Lucas and Vanessa sat in the front row, perfectly composed. Vanessa wore a pale blue dress that made her look as delicate as porcelain. Lucas's face was the picture of sorrow, but his eyes never left mine. He was daring me to break down, to show weakness. Judge Linda Freeman presided over the hearing. Her gavel sharp and final. The prosecution argued that my wealth made me a flight risk and my supposed crime made me dangerous. Marcus stood beside me, confident and unyielding. My client has deep roots in this community. She has never so much as had a parking ticket, let alone fled from responsibility. The evidence is circumstantial. We are prepared to fight these charges and clear her name. The judge set bail at $2 million, high enough to send a message, but not impossible to meet. I would have to surrender my passport and wear an electronic monitor, and I was ordered to stay away from all witnesses, including my own family. As I was led out of the courtroom, Marcus pulled me aside. His voice was tense with urgency. "We found something big," he whispered. "Vanessa St. Clair's real name is actually Rebecca Martinez. She's wanted by the FBI for a series of frauds and suspicious deaths targeting elderly men and women across 4 states. She's been running this scam for over a decade." My knees nearly buckled. "How many victims?" 7 that we know of. Maybe more. She marries wealthy, kills for inheritance, then disappears. My world spun. I glanced back at Vanessa in the gallery. She met my gaze, her expression unchanged, cold, steady, unflinching. A mask she had worn her entire life. "And Lucas?" I whispered. Marcus's face was grim. "We confirmed he's been taking out loans against his expected inheritance. He owes money to men who play for keeps. He called your estate attorney 6 weeks ago asking about your will. He knew he'd been cut out, Eleanor." I felt a chill crawl up my spine as the memory surfaced. The day I'd amended my will to leave the family fortune to charity, ensuring Lucas would be provided for but never tempted to squander everything. I'd done it out of love. Now it had nearly killed me, so if I'm convicted, I whispered, Lucas could claim I was incompetent, challenge the will, and inherit everything after all, Marcus finished. That's the plan. They tried to kill you, frame you, and destroy your name so they could get what they wanted even after you disinherited him. A wave of fury and heartbreak rose in my chest, choking me. "He's my son," I said, almost pleading. "I raised him. I loved him." "Desperation makes monsters out of people," Marcus said softly. That night, back in my home with the ankle monitor digging into my skin, I felt more imprisoned than I ever had in that jail cell. The estate was swarming with reporters. The phone rang nonstop with calls from lawyers, relatives, and journalists. Every headline made me look like a villain, and Lucas was only too happy to fan the flames, giving statements to the press about his mother's mental decline and his wife's brush with death. But Marcus and Ben kept working. The FBI was now involved, piecing together a case against Rebecca Martinez Vanessa while keeping me informed. My anger began to transform into something colder and more useful, a resolve that I would not let them win. That night, as I sat in my dim study, Ben called. His voice was calm but full of warning. "We have a plan," he said. "It's risky, but it might be the only way to force them out into the open." "What do you want me to do?" I asked. My voice as hard as the glass of whiskey in my hand. "We leak word to the press that you've discovered evidence audio, documents, something concrete that proves you were framed. We make it seem like you're preparing to hand it over to the police. They won't be able to resist. They'll have to act before you can clear your name." "They'll come after me," I said, my stomach twisting. "That's the idea. We'll have agents nearby watching everything. But you need to be careful, Eleanor. Rebecca is a professional killer. Lucas, I'm not sure where his heart is anymore." I thought of Lucas's face as a boy, his laughter echoing down these same hallways, the pride in his eyes the first time he hit a home run, the way he'd run to me after every disappointment. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who had chosen greed over his own mother's life. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said. I refused to die their victim. The next morning, the media was alive with rumors. Eleanor Maddox had found secret evidence, and in 48 hours, she was going to turn it over to the authorities. Marcus insisted on keeping me in the estate even as I begged to leave. They'll only come for you here, he said. This is where they feel most confident. This is where they'll make their move. For 2 days, I lived like a ghost in my own home, every sound magnified, every shadow a threat. The FBI set up surveillance cameras, agents in unmarked cars, and a hidden panic button on my phone. Marcus and Ben checked in every hour, keeping me calm even as my nerves threatened to snap. On the third night, the trap was set. I sat in the study, pretending to sort through a pile of old documents. The house was dark except for the desk lamp. I could feel the tension in the air, a heaviness that pressed on my chest. It was just after midnight when the motion sensors flickered. I saw the shadow move along the garden wall, heard the soft click of the French doors opening. Lucas stepped inside first, moving quietly, every step sure. Behind him, Rebecca, no longer Vanessa, no longer Serena, moved with the precision of a hunter. She carried a small black bag, her eyes glittering in the dark. I forced myself to remain still, back to the door, heart pounding in my throat. They whispered in the hallway. She have it in her safe, Lucas said. Her birthday's the code. She always uses her birthday. They tore through drawers, rifling through files, cursing when they found nothing. After 20 minutes, Rebecca's voice cut through the darkness. Are you sure she even has it? What if this is a trap? She has to. She always has an ace up her sleeve, Lucas muttered. We'll ask her directly. And if she won't talk, the rest of. Her sentence hung in the air, unfinished but full of menace. They found me in the study, exactly where I wanted to be found. Lucas entered first, eyes wild but determined. Rebecca stayed near the door, blocking my escape, syringe in her hand. Hello, Mother, Lucas said, his voice low. We need to talk. About the evidence you think you have. I don't know. What you mean, I said, letting my hands tremble. What evidence? Rebecca stepped forward, her mask gone. Her voice was flat and cold. Give it to us and this ends quickly. No one else needs to get hurt. There is no evidence, I said, voice barely more than a whisper. I made it up. I thought if people believed I could prove I was innocent, someone would look closer at what really happened. Lucas stared at me, torn between anger and fear. Rebecca watched my face for any sign of deception, her eyes razor sharp. She's telling the truth, Rebecca said, almost disappointed. She doesn't have it. So what do we do now? Lucas asked, his voice shaking. Rebecca's smile was pure malice. We finish what we started. She raised the syringe and stepped toward me, eyes locked on mine. Wait, I said, my voice breaking. Before you do this, I need to know, was any of it real? Did you ever love me, Lucas? Or was it always about the money? For a split second, something flickered in his eyes, a memory, maybe, or the ghost of regret. But Rebecca cut him off, her voice like ice. He loves your money just like I do. Just like everyone who ever pretended to care about you. The Inas tiras dive. Words sliced deeper than any blade. I looked up at them, letting the pain and betrayal wash over me. Thank you, I whispered, for telling me the truth. Rebecca's eyes narrowed in confusion, and in that instant the doors burst open and FBI agents flooded the room. There were shouts, flashing lights, the clatter of footsteps. Lucas froze. Rebecca lunged at me with the syringe, but an agent tackled her to the floor, the syringe skittering across the carpet. Within seconds, it was over as they handcuffed Lucas and Rebecca. Lucas turned to look at me, horror etched into his face. You set us up, he said, voice breaking. I met his gaze, feeling nothing but cold resolve. You tried to murder me. Lucas, I just finished what you started. As the agents led them away, I slumped in my chair, every muscle trembling. The game was over, but the wounds they left would never fully heal. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom that felt nothing like justice and everything like survival. The courtroom was cold, with light slaying through windows high above the heads of the crowd. The world watched as the truth finally surfaced. Rebecca Martinez, formerly Serena Maddox, was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms for murders across state lines, for the frauds, for turning death into a business model. There was no way to count the number of lives she had shattered. Her true face had finally been revealed, and it was empty of remorse. Lucas was there too, no longer polished and proud, but a shadow of the man I once called my son. He was sentenced to 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. When they led him away in chains, he turned to look at me one last time. His eyes searched for mercy or understanding, but I had none left to give. I sat with my back straight and my hands folded, feeling only a cold, hollow sort of satisfaction. I saw no sign of the little boy who used to crawl into my lap after a bad dream. That boy was gone. All that remained was a man destroyed by his own greed. When the verdicts were read, the media story changed overnight. Suddenly, I was the survivor, the matriarch who had outwitted a professional killer and exposed a criminal network. Offers for interviews, book deals, and documentaries flooded in. Reporters wanted every last detail, but I turned them all away. Some wounds are too deep for display. I kept my story and my pain to myself. Marcus handled the legal cleanup, working tirelessly to restore my reputation. The charges against me were dropped and my name was cleared, but I knew my life would never be the same. Friends who once called every week vanished into silence. Some were embarrassed, others ashamed that they believed the worst about me. I didn't blame them, but I didn't forget either. Then, my old friend and former colleague remained by my side through it all. His wisdom and unwavering support were a comfort as I rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal. Every day I walked the halls of the estate, remembering the laughter and warmth that once filled its rooms, mourning what was lost, but refusing to let bitterness take root. The FBI kept me updated as they dismantled Rebecca's network. Her accomplices were arrested. Her hidden accounts seized. The assets she'd stolen over the years would never buy her freedom or comfort. I made sure that the families of her victims were notified. Some sent letters, thank yous written with trembling hands, telling me that because of my ordeal, they finally had answers. As for Lucas, I did not visit him. The pain was still too fresh. He sent letters from prison filled with apologies, explanations, and empty promises. He blamed Rebecca, claimed he never meant to hurt me, that he was manipulated, but he still loved me as his mother. I read each letter exactly once, then burned them in the fireplace. My forgiveness was something he would have to live without. With the criminal chapter behind me, I turned to the one thing I could still control, my legacy. I rewrote my will a final time, leaving everything not to Lucas, not to any blood relative, but to the Maddox Foundation for Animal Welfare. My family's fortune would go to creatures who gave love freely and asked for nothing in return. For the first time in years, I felt at peace with my decision. I replaced the locks on every door and window. The security system was upgraded, and I hired new staff loyal, trustworthy, and screened by Ben himself. The estate no longer felt haunted. The spaces where Lucas once played as a child, where Rebecca once posed as a loving wife, now belonged to me alone. The land, the house, the oil fields, they were mine not as a prison, but as a place to finally be free. Still, some nights I wandered the halls unable to sleep, the echo of old betrayals lingering in the shadows. It was easy to dwell on what had been stolen from me: family, peace, the comfort of trust. But as spring unfurled across the land, I found myself able to open the windows again, to let in sunlight and hope. The media circus faded, replaced by respectful silence. People eventually remembered me not as the accused, but as the woman who had survived the storm. My neighbors, the ones who truly mattered, returned with warm casseroles and even warmer words. Some apologized for doubting me, others simply sat quietly, knowing words could never be enough. One morning, as I stood by the window, watching the oil pumps moving steadily in the dawn light, a letter arrived. It was from the family of one of Rebecca's other victims, a woman named Ruth, whose brother had died under suspicious circumstances years before. The letter was full of gratitude and sorrow. They wrote that because of me, they finally understood what had happened and could mourn properly. I pressed the letter to my chest, letting the tears come. For the first time, I felt the sharp pain of loss transform into something softer, something like healing. As the months passed, I poured my energy into the foundation. I toured animal shelters, met with staff, and watched as my fortune built. Something good from all the ruin. I set up scholarships for students who wanted to work in animal rescue, funded mobile clinics for rural areas, and watched as the Maddox name slowly became known for compassion instead of scandal. Every animal saved, every life improved, became a quiet act of revenge against the darkness my son and his wife had tried to bring into my world. But my greatest satisfaction came from knowing Lucas would inherit nothing but the consequences of his choices. I knew from Ben's contacts that prison life was not easy for a man like him, especially for one who had betrayed not only his mother, but also hardened criminals he owed money to. The people he'd once tried to impress now knew everything, and his name was mud both inside and outside those walls. Rebecca, I heard, fared even worse. Her crimes against the elderly made her a target. Even behind bars, there was no place to hide from the justice she had so long escaped. The world she built on lies was finally crumbling around her. It was nearly a year to the day after the trial when I sat once more in my study, a fire crackling quietly and a glass of wine in hand. The estate was peaceful, the air fragrant with wisteria and new grass. I listened to the quiet and realized it was the sound of freedom, the freedom from fear, from regret, from the poison of those who had tried to destroy me. I thought of Lucas. One last time, not with anger, but with a deep, quiet sorrow. He had been my son, my joy, the child I would have given anything to protect, but love cannot survive where trust is broken. The man who sat in that prison was not my son any longer. He was a stranger, and the past could not be rewritten. I raised my glass to the memory of the girl I once was, a girl who believed in family above all, who trusted without question, who would have died for those she loved. That girl was gone, but in her place stood a woman who had survived betrayal, outlasted lies, and rebuilt her life from ashes. To justice, I whispered, to survival, to never ever letting yourself be someone's victim, no matter how much you love them. Spring deepened across the estate, painting the fields with wildflowers and the air with birdsong. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to slow down. I walked the gravel paths at sunrise, the cool air full of promise, watching deer graze along the fence line and rabbits dart through tall grass. Every step reminded me I was free, not because my enemies were gone, but because I'd finally reclaimed my home and my life from their shadow. The news media eventually moved on. Other scandals took their place. My name faded from headlines, and for that I was grateful. I could walk into town without stares or whispers following me, could shop for groceries and chat with neighbors who finally seemed to look at me as Eleanor Maddox again, not as a suspect, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The Maddox Foundation flourished. Every week brought letters from shelters and rescue organizations thanking us for donations, for the new kennels, the veterinary vans, and the scholarships for young students passionate about animal welfare. I traveled across Texas and beyond, visiting the places our work had touched. Each time I stepped into a room full of wagging tails or saw the bright smiles of children reading to shelter dogs, I felt the tiniest crack in my heart begin to mend. The estate itself was transformed. Gone were the heavy drapes and somber portraits, the rooms kept only for tradition's sake. I opened windows, let in light, and filled the house with laughter whenever friends came to visit. My kitchen was always stocked with coffee and pastries. For those who dropped by, no more secrets, no more suspicion. Just warmth. Some nights, though, the silence still pressed on me. I would find myself wandering the halls, trailing my fingers along the polished banister, remembering the echoes of Lucas's childhood. I wondered if he thought of me from his cell, or if he ever regretted the choices that brought him there. I knew the answer, though I had read it in his letters. Each one a confession, each one a plea for forgiveness I could not give. Was no healing for a betrayal like his. But there was still grace in letting go of anger. I had survived his worst, and I had outlived it. The wounds he left had changed me, but they had not destroyed me. That was my quiet victory. As for Rebecca, I never spoke her name again. I learned through Ben and the FBI that she would never see the outside world. Her past finally caught up, with her in courtrooms far from mine as victims' families took the stand to share their stories. The justice system worked slowly but thoroughly, and she was forced to hear every account of the pain she'd caused, every name she'd erased in her pursuit of wealth. In those moments, I realized something important. Evil is always loud when it wants something. It demands, it manipulates, it schemes. But goodness, the kind that saves lives and rebuilds hope, moves quietly and endures. I had been targeted for my fortune, my trust, my love, but I had survived because I still believed in the value of what is quietly good. As the months passed, I set new goals for myself and the foundation. I worked with Ben and Marcus to fund legal clinics for women in trouble, so no one would have to feel alone if their world collapsed. I partnered with teachers to offer scholarships to girls who dreamed of law school, of making a difference for others. I saw the world begin to open again, not with the naive hope I'd once carried, But with a measured, hard-earned optimism, my own circle grew smaller, but deeper. I cherished every visit from the few friends who stayed, from the old neighbors who refused to believe the rumors, from the staff who had stood by me even as the police searched every room and every drawer. Together, we built a new family, one of choice, of respect, of trust tested and proved. I was not alone in my recovery. There were nights when fear still crept up on me, when a noise outside would set my heart pounding or a familiar song would bring tears to my eyes. But I learned not to run from these moments. I faced them, let them wash over me, and waited for the pain to pass. Ben became more than an old colleague, he became the brother I never had. His wife, a gentle soul who baked the world's best banana bread, insisted I come for Sunday dinners. Marcus, once only my lawyer, turned into a steady friend, someone who reminded me that no storm lasted forever. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Ben and I sat together in my kitchen. He poured us both coffee and watched the rain streak down the windows. "You did more than survive, Eleanor," he said quietly. "You changed the story. Not everyone gets that chance." I thought about his words long after he left, their weight lingering with me through the lonely hours. Maybe I had changed the story, turned pain into something useful, let darkness become a reason for light. For the first time in a long while, I let myself feel proud. The estate became a place of healing. Not just for me, but for those who needed it. Stray animals found their way to my door. Sometimes neighbors too, hurting in ways I recognized from my own recent scars. I welcomed them all, never turning away a single soul who needed comfort or safety. My kitchen became a sanctuary, coffee, conversation, and the knowledge that no matter how hard life gets, you can always rebuild. I learned the most important lessons from the animals I rescued. They came frightened, sometimes angry, often broken. But with patience, gentle hands, and steady love, they learned to trust again. Watching their transformations helped me find the patience to be gentle with myself. Sometimes I would sit on the porch at dusk, a dog curled at my feet, watching the sun slip behind the horizon. I felt the ache of what I lost, but I also felt the fullness of what I gained: strength, wisdom, and a quiet peace. The oil pumps still worked in the fields, tireless and unchanged, but I no longer measured my life by what they brought up from the ground. I measured it instead by the lives I touched, the hope I restored, the laughter I could still hear echoing through my home. The Maddox Foundation became known as a force for good, a legacy that would outlive me. It was the revenge I never knew I wanted, not against Lucas or Rebecca, but against despair itself. There were days when regret tried to creep in, days when I wondered if I could have changed things, saved Lucas from himself, seen through Rebecca's mask sooner. But I let those thoughts come and go, the way one lets a storm blow through, knowing it will pass. I had been broken, yes, but I had also been rebuilt. Stronger, wiser, and kinder. That was the true inheritance I hoped to leave behind, a testament that no matter how cruel the betrayal, healing was possible. One evening, just as the first fireflies began to appear, I found a letter on my doorstep. It was from a young woman who had received one of our scholarships. She wrote about her own struggles, her fears that she would never be good enough, her gratitude for the chance our foundation had given her. Her words moved me more than any courtroom victory ever could. In that moment, I understood that forgiveness is not always for those who have wronged us. Sometimes it is for ourselves, so we can let go of the pain and step into the future with hope. As summer arrived and the air grew heavy with promise, I raised a glass to the memory of what was lost, and to all that had been found. I was not defeated, was not alone. And for the first time in years, I looked toward tomorrow with something that felt almost like joy. Late summer brought a peace I had not known in decades. The world outside my gates was restless as always: politics, markets, the endless rush of lives moving forward, but inside the estate, the air was soft and still. My home had finally become a sanctuary again, its every corner filled with reminders of renewal rather than ruin. In the quiet moments before dawn, I often sat in the window seat of my bedroom with a mug of tea, gazing out over the fields as mist curled through the grass. The land was healing, and so was I. There was a new rhythm to my days, and it was nothing like the life I'd known before. My mornings started early, checking in with the Maddox Foundation staff, answering emails from shelters and volunteers, and planning new projects to reach even further into communities where hope was needed most. I found purpose in work that was gentle but fierce, a kind of fight for good that used compassion as its weapon. I became a familiar face at local events, charity auctions, and animal adoption days. Children would run up to me, laughing, some of them clutching the hands of rescue dogs or carrying kittens in cardboard boxes. I learned their stories. I remembered every name. In their eyes, I saw gratitude, resilience, and the innocence I thought I had lost forever. Each life we saved was a small victory against the shadows of my past. The Maddox estate grew lively. Friends who had vanished during the scandal began to return, their embarrassment softened by time and my quiet forgiveness. Old neighbors dropped by with pies and stories, and soon laughter returned to the dining room. I even hosted a reunion for the staff who had worked for my family over the years: housekeepers, gardeners, drivers, many of whom had become family to me when my own flesh and blood betrayed me. We toasted to new beginnings and remembered the old times, both good and bad. One afternoon, Marcus arrived unexpectedly. He looked different, more relaxed, his suit replaced by jeans and an open-collared shirt. He brought news from the outside world, but for the first time it was all good. The FBI case is closed, Eleanor. Rebecca is never getting out. Lucas's appeals were denied. The court recognized his role in the conspiracy. His sentence stands. I nodded, feeling the weight of finality settle in. It wasn't happiness I felt, but something close to relief. Justice, in its slow and grinding way, had finally prevailed. The ghosts of betrayal were quiet at last. There's more, Marcus said, sitting beside me at the kitchen table. We've tracked down the last of Rebecca's hidden assets. The Foundation is about to receive a significant windfall. It's poetic, really. The money she stole from others will now save thousands of lives. We clinked coffee mugs, the gesture simple and honest. Marcus stayed for dinner, and for the first time in years, I felt no need to keep one eye on the door, no urge to hide my pain. That night, when the house was still and the only sounds were the creak of floorboards and the distant call of an owl, I found myself thinking of Lucas. He had sent another letter, a long, rambling apology, full of desperate hope and regret. He begged for forgiveness, blamed Rebecca, swore that greed had clouded his mind and broken his heart. I read his words over and over, searching for the son I once loved. But all I found was the echo of his choices, the empty promises, and the consequences he now had to live with. I could not bring myself to write back. My silence was the only answer I had left to give. There were days when I wondered if I could have saved him. If I had given more or less, or simply loved him differently, would things have turned out another way? But that was the cruelty of hindsight. It always made you doubt your best efforts, your truest intentions. I chose instead to focus on the world I could still change. Ben and his wife became regular fixtures at my table. Their kindness reminded me that family is not always bound by blood. Sometimes it is found in shared burdens and laughter over late-night pie, in the warmth of people who refuse to walk away when times are darkest. With them, I found the kind of acceptance I once thought only came from kin. I continued to work with the legal clinics we had founded for women in crisis. I met women from every walk of life, some running from violence, others from poverty, some simply lost and looking for a hand to hold. Their courage humbled me, their stories reflected pieces of my own. I told them what I had learned in the hardest way possible, that even after the worst betrayals, there is always a path back to hope. One afternoon, while volunteering at a shelter, I met a teenage girl named Grace. She had fled an abusive home, bringing only a backpack and a frightened puppy she refused to leave behind. Grace reminded me of myself at her age, tough, stubborn, refusing to let anyone see how much she hurt. I helped her find a place to stay and made sure the puppy was cared for. Months later, she sent a letter telling me she was enrolled in college and dreaming of becoming a veterinarian. It was a small thing, but to me, it was proof that the future could still be rewritten. Every season brought its own healing. In autumn, I decorated the house with pumpkins and leaves, hosted Halloween parties for children from the local shelter, and handed out candy with a smile. At Thanksgiving, I opened my doors to anyone who needed a family for the holiday. At Christmas, the estate was filled with music, laughter, and the sense of cinnamon and thyme. These traditions became new rituals, ways to replace the bitter memories with moments of genuine joy. There were setbacks, 2 days when grief ambushed me, when the old wounds ached and I questioned whether I would ever feel whole. But each time I returned to the routines I built, to the people and creatures who depended on me, and found my way back to the present. Sometimes, in the quiet after everyone had gone, I sat by the fire with a glass of wine, the flames dancing. Across the old photographs on the mantel, I looked at Lucas as a baby, as a boy, his arms wrapped around a stray dog, both of them grinning at the camera. I let myself grieve not just for what I lost, but for what he could have been. And then, just as always, I stood up and walked through the rooms of my home, locking doors and turning out lights, and felt gratitude. Not because life had spared me pain, but because I had survived it. Because I had taken the worst the world could throw and turned it into something that made a difference. The Maddox Foundation was thriving. The land was thriving. My heart was healing. As the first frost touched the fields, I stood at my window and breathed in the cold, clean air. My life had changed forever, but it was not over. I was ready at last for whatever came next. Winter brought long nights and bright, icy mornings. The land seemed to sleep beneath a pale blue sky, and with each sunrise, I felt the ache of the past begin to recede a little more. I spent those cold months tending to the things that had endured, the animals, the foundation, the friendships that had survived the storm. Evenings were spent by the fire with a book and a rescued dog at my feet, the crackle of flames chasing away old ghosts. There was a kind of magic in this new quiet. I no longer woke to dread or shame. I no longer feared the sound of a knock at the door or the ring of the telephone. The estate had transformed from a fortress into a home again, a place filled not with suspicion, but with welcome. I hung new curtains, painted the walls in soft colors, and filled every room with fresh flowers. It was as though I was daring the world to try and take my joy again. The Maddox Foundation grew beyond anything I'd imagined. We opened new shelters, funded mobile clinics, and created scholarships that changed dozens of young lives. I met people who taught me that compassion is a kind of rebellion against the darkness, one act of kindness at a time. The letters that came each week piled high on my desk, full of thanks, stories, and hope. As the new year began, I sat down to write my own letter, a letter not to Lucas, but to myself. I wrote about everything I had survived, everything I had learned, and everything I still hoped to become. It wasn't a list of regrets. It was a promise to keep living, to keep giving, to keep loving in the face of loss. Every so often, I still thought of Lucas. There was no anger left in me, only a sorrow so deep it could not be put into words. I had loved him fiercely as only a mother can, and nothing, not even betrayal, could erase that love completely. But I knew now that loving someone does not mean sacrificing yourself. Sometimes it means letting them go. He sent one last letter a year after the trial. The words were careful, almost shy, as if he hoped I might forgive him if he asked just right. He wrote of long nights in prison, of mistakes and nightmares, of the memory of laughter and home. He asked for forgiveness. He told me he understood. If I could never give it, I read his letter at my kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the page, and I let myself cry not for him, but for the ending of our story together. Then I folded the letter, placed it in a box with all the others, and put it away. There would be no reply. That chapter was closed. Spring returned, and with it a feeling I thought I had lost forever. Peace. I celebrated the season by inviting the Foundation's volunteers to the estate. We walked the gardens, laughed under blooming magnolias, and shared stories over long, sunlit lunches. I watched as new generations of hope filled the air with possibility. Ben and his wife sat beside me on the porch, and Marcus brought his new puppy to meet the Maddox dogs. We drank iced tea and talked about the future. No one mentioned the trial or the pain or the betrayals. Instead, we looked forward, always forward, toward what could still be built. The day the Foundation's biggest project opened a brand new animal sanctuary on the far side of the estate. I stood at the gates and felt a wave of gratitude so intense it nearly brought me to my knees. The people gathered around me were the family I had chosen, the ones who had walked through the fire and come out stronger. A reporter from the local paper asked me what I wanted my legacy to be. I didn't hesitate. I want to be remembered as someone who refused to be defined by what others did to her, someone who turned pain into purpose, someone who gave more than she ever lost. After everyone left, I stood alone in the sanctuary barn, listening to the soft breathing of rescued animals. I ran my hand along the railings, smelling hay and cedar, hearing the distant songs of birds outside. I closed my eyes and whispered a silent thank you for survival, for second chances, for the fierce, unbreakable heart I had discovered inside myself. I no longer needed approval from those who had betrayed me. I no longer searched for love in the places that hurt me. The Maddox name, once nearly destroyed by greed and cruelty, now stood for something else. Hope, healing, and the power to rise again. Evenings were no longer haunted. The estate was filled with friends, neighbors, and laughter. I often cooked for everyone, filling the kitchen with the scent of garlic and fresh bread. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and even the smallest victories, each one a reminder that life could still surprise us with goodness. Some nights, I would walk the grounds alone, the grass cool beneath my feet, the stars endless above. I would think of all that had been lost, but also all that had been saved. I learned to forgive myself for not seeing the truth sooner, for trusting too deeply, for believing that love could fix what it could not. I learned that surviving is not the same as living, but sometimes one must come before the other. As the years passed, my hair turned silver and my steps slowed, but my spirit only grew stronger. I found meaning in every day, in every act of kindness, and every soul that crossed my path needing help. I left the doors of my home open, both in welcome and warning, that nothing, no betrayal, no cruelty, no storm could ever destroy what I had built from the ashes. My last will was simple. Every penny of my fortune, every acre of land, every ounce of love would go to the foundation, to the animals, to the women and children who needed a safe place to land. There would be no more opportunities for those who saw me only as a bank account. My legacy would be measured not by wealth, but by lives touched and saved. As I sit here, the sun setting through the kitchen window and the world outside quiet with possibility, I realize the story of Eleanor Maddox is not a tragedy. It is a testament to endurance, to resilience, and to the simple, stubborn act of choosing hope. Thank you for listening to my story. If my journey moved you, please join our community and subscribe, so you never miss another true story of survival and strength. Remember, your story matters. Never let anyone else write the ending for you. Until next time, this is Her True Stories.